Gamechangers.
Hello and welcome to this first edition of Gamechangers. My name is Chris Uglietta. I'm based in Austin, Texas. And today we're going to jump into the impact of IDFA. This is actually the first of a three-part series. The first part is IDFA impact. The second is the creative is king story around, really how are we driving impact now that IDFA has gone away. And the third is A/B testing. How do we A/B test and optimize those creatives? And really, to bring us the truth here and to school us today, I'm glad to have as our first guest Brian Bowman, who is the founder and CEO of famed UA and creative shop Consumer Acquisition. Brian is in the Bay Area. Please say hello.
Hey, Chris. Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to talking.
Awesome. If you would, just give us an overview of your business. You guys are really top-notch in the industry, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say today.
Sure. Well, as a way of background, we're about 8.5 years old. We've managed over $3.5 billion in paid social spend. Majority of that is in the mobile app space, heavy concentration in gaming, but we also do web-based performance advertising. Really, the business is broken down into two pieces. We have a creative studio where we produce videos and images at scale. We're working with companies like King, Rovio, Jam City, Supercell, and others, where we help them think outside the box and augment their internal capabilities. And then, of course, we do growth marketing or paid UA for the channels off to the right there: Facebook, Google, TikTok, Snap, and Apple search ads.
Thank you. And I'll say I had the privilege of working with you in the social casino space. And one of the things I like working with you and your company is kind of the reality you bring, kind of the straight talk, and you're not afraid to tell it how it is. And that's one of the reasons I invited you to be our first guest today. So with that in mind, let's get stuck into it. Brian, please bring us up to date on the latest shakedown of the IDFA impact.
Yeah, IDFA is a once-in-a-generation tectonic shift, and it's having pretty profound impacts across the industry. And to set a little context on what this is and why it's important, Apple announced last year that they were going to remove their tracker called an IDFA. Think of it like your social security number or the address on your house. And for the entire length of iOS advertising, companies have been allowed to use that as a mechanism to understand who someone is and how to personalize and customize ads for them. And Apple's approach in terms of why they said they were doing this is that privacy is a human right, and therefore they wanted to allow the individual to determine whether or not an app was tracking or personalizing their ads or not. In iOS 14.6, when the whole thing started, so it's below the little 14 there, you get the pop-up window that Apple had required all third parties to present. And it's pretty aggressive language. It's, allow this app to track you across apps and businesses. Now, they did not require that Apple's own apps, Maps, email, etc., pop that same requirement, that same window up. So they took that out in iOS 15, but the messaging is fundamentally different. It's soft, and it's positioned as turn on a personalized ad experience. And what are the benefits in doing so? It's the exact same thing. One is anti-advertising industry, and one is self-serving and kind of self-promotional for them. So it's an example that the playing field is certainly not leveled between the two. And my opinion on why they're doing this is, they surrendered control of the App Store to Google and to Facebook. And they've done a phenomenal job, Google and Facebook, that is, on personalizing and allowing you to find apps that you're going to be interested in. And they're dismantling that as they go. So, again, once in a lifetime change, and it's having a fairly substantial financial and industry-wide impact. And to give you an example, broadly speaking, iOS apps are going to lose somewhere between 15% on the low end, all the way up to 35% on the high end.
And Brian, let me interrupt you. Just a question from the previous slide. So, essentially Apple relinquished control of the download channel to the networks through paid ads, and now they're basically reclaiming that. What do you think their motivation is there?
Well, it seems as if they're going to try and launch another ad network. They clearly have failed twice on doing it. I would suppose that the third time won't be much better. But if you look at the user experience, how many people go to the App Store to search and find compelling apps? Very few. They find them through advertising based on what their personal preferences are set. That's highly customized to what they're currently doing. So there really was no need for the App Store, and certainly not a need for a curated experience where a human being would tell you what to do instead of what my behaviors and how I'm spending my time would do. So, there's a fundamental difference between, I think, the industry approach, which is delight me and surprise me with personalized ads based on what I am currently doing and interacting with, versus the Apple approach, which seems to be human curated. We know better. We're going to present to you apps you may like.
Got it.
And it's just, the more personalized you get, I think the better the advertising experience is. And if you want a good example of bad advertising, look at TV ads today, right? They're highly uncustomized, highly unpersonalized, and in many ways feel like spam.
Sure do. Thanks a lot.
Sure. So to the point in terms of financial impact, the more niche your audience, meaning you're looking for, in the example Chris gave of a social casino client who is going to spend a bunch of money to purchase an in-app thing, a cow, credit subscriptions. That's a very niche thing. They're going to be more negatively impacted than if someone is a very broad casual game, they will be less impacted. And the specific things that are changing here is that only about 35% of humans that see that pop-up there to the right are clicking yes. Yes, I would allow myself to be tracked. The right way of saying it is, yes, I want personalized ads. That means 65% of people are opting out. So the efficiency and the sophistication of these lookalike audiences that are based off of deterministic tracking are dropping by about 65%. So that is a kind of a shot across the bow of the entities that have built really sophisticated machine learning algorithms. And if you read the public earnings, and I'll on the next slide, I'll show you a few of the kind of key takeaways here. This is a multi-year effort, and it is not recoverable in the short term. And I think in Q2, companies kind of sidestepped the issue because there was a lot going on in the greater economy and COVID, et cetera. And as Q3 finished, it became clear there's a pretty significant impact by those that are focused on direct response advertising, so Facebook, Snap, and YouTube, and that advertisers really are having no choice but to diversify their portfolio to move away from iOS advertising because of the loss of the efficiency. And you're going to see companies in the SDK network space, Unity, AppLoving, are really taking off. Because at the end of the day, what's happening is for iOS, contextual advertising seems to be the future, right? You're losing deterministic tracking, you're losing efficiency. So you're going to end up with, what do I read, watch, and listen to in terms of clusters, and then layer that on with creative that may be helpful. And in all ways, it's like rolling backwards to consumer packaged good advertising. So it's substantially less efficient. We're going to end up in a world of media mix model, incrementality testing, and a lot of loss for the industry.
Yeah, so essentially we're going back from targeting on an individual basis to targeting personas and sort of general behavior. So definitely a step backwards in the industry.
Yeah, on iOS, to be specific.
Yep, got that. Yeah, let's dive into that.
Yeah, so I thought, and I read like 150 pages of all the earnings transcripts. There were some really amazing zingers in there from a variety of companies. And I bolded some of them. We don't need to go through them all here, but the kind of key takeaway is it's a multi-year effort. It's going to take a lot of time. Budgets are rapidly shifting from traditionally 80% of a large advertiser's portfolio was Facebook and Google. And now what we're seeing is money is shifting towards Android, and money is going into the SDK and DSP space. So that as the efficiency of iOS advertising drops, it's becoming normalized against what the other networks can do because they were built to be probabilistic in their core. So calling out a few, Unity and AppLoving, if you read the quotes there, they're growing and they're taking off. And you have to now incorporate that into the work that you're doing in order to maintain some level of efficiency. The irony is it's now more complex to manage because you're now having, instead of running 2 networks, you're going to have to run 6 or 8 or 10. So the impact on the teams is going to be more difficult for them to find these pockets of efficiency and then to get them to run well.
Real briefly, looking at ironSource and AppLoving, who are both claiming a net positive here, how are they able to do that, at least on the iOS side, despite much less data available to them? How is that working for them?
Yeah, so my limited understanding, if in particular, if you look at Adam's quote from AppLovin, is that they have been built from the ground up based on their first-party data. In all cases, Unity in particular, these are massive, massive data troves. And I think they have 3 billion people in the Unity infrastructure. So they've got an awful lot of data that they can leverage to do that style of advertising. They didn't build machine learning based on deterministic values like IDFA. So the impact to them is less. They built it from the ground up to be contextual, and now they're benefiting from that because they're not dropping the efficiency down, right? The world is meeting them where they are. So now the level playing field is that the SDK networks appear to be as efficient as other sources for iOS advertising.
So essentially, they're gathering data through their SDKs and sharing that as users migrate to different apps within their SDK network.
Yes.
Cool.
There's a couple other things I think are important here. Again, a lot of information on the slide, but really the takeaway here is if you look at what Facebook and Twitter are saying, that their ad impressions are up and CPMs are up. And so as ad impressions go up, that means ad quality typically goes down. And so there's a lot of proxies you can look at. We use click to install or CTR as just an initial sniff test. It's very clear impressions are in fact up, and as impressions go up, because of the loss of deterministic tracking, the quality is going down. So you see this not only in loss of whatever the KPI is, ROAS, ARPU, CAC, some of the kind of financial downstream metrics, but also in the higher level metrics like click to install and the quality of the traffic that you're getting. So not only is the traffic harder to find, meaning the quality of the user, but when you get them, you're having to buy a lot more traffic that may not convert. Net impact is the efficiency and the margin with which iOS advertising is being purchased today is down.
Right. Yeah, it's surprising to see CPMs up, but it certainly makes sense if publishers are basically having to buy a lot more junk to reach the targets they want. Obviously, certain people are going to benefit from that overspend.
I mean, if you think about it selfishly from the platform side, right? What are they going to look to do? They're going to look to maximize their own eCPM so they can maintain earnings. So they're going to want as much inventory as possible, and they're going to want to automate the distribution of that inventory as much as possible so that they're able to maintain the current way that they're doing business.
Sure.
And so, if you take all of this at face value, there are many of us, myself included, where we're trying to fight like heck to maintain the status quo of yesterday, and it's just not reality. And I think Cheryl from Facebook says it well. It's a multi-year effort, and it's going to take a long time to figure out how to recover these pockets of efficiency. So they came out with this really good report, and if you've not read it, I would encourage people to. It's called The Big Catch. And the quote that's there is, by continuously using the same optimization tools and lookalike audiences, people are risking themselves out of the market. You have to do something different because lookalike audiences are heavily impacted on iOS. The thing that seems to be sustainable for the long term while less efficient is this idea that have I done marketing segmentation analysis? Do I know who my users are? What they read, what they watch, what they listen to, and then can I layer on smart creative that speaks to them in the way that they would find most valuable? That helps recover some of that loss in efficiency.
Definitely an opportunity for external CI studies to come into play here, so you really know your customer deeper than just what shows up in the UI dashboard.
And one of the things I think most companies are now waking up to is the brutality of the SK ad network limitations. Specifically, You have to understand if a consumer has an indication of monetization in the first 24 hours. Most apps and websites are not made to do that, right? If you have a 3-day free trial or a 7-day free trial, your ability to know the source of that traffic and then to go find more of it is gone. So you have to figure out if someone's going to pay you in the first 24 hours. That means a fairly significant change to the onboarding flow so that you can get some signal back through your app events or web events to give you an idea that this person seems to be down a monetization path. So not only is it difficult on the user acquisition, monetization, LTV side, it is going to force a fundamental shift in terms of the product teams and how they are onboarding consumers and measuring them. And if there's any good hope, watching what's going on with Apple and Epic, is that that 30%, I hope, will drop. My guess will be down to 5%. That's where it should be. And we'll have to see how the appeal process goes.
Yeah, I hope to see a lot more developers go with the alternative payment route, something we're going to be watching closely at App Annie through GameIQ feature tagging. Yeah, this is definitely an additional headwind for any title, particularly social casino, where they're really chasing whales. And a lot of times to get those whales to monetize, you have to get them hooked on your social flows. And really hard to do that in the first 24 hours. So we'll see some creative solutions here.
For certain. So, in summarizing what I think we are in the first step of this is you got to test the SDK networks and you got to start testing them right away. And the four we're calling out kind of in priority order here are Unity, AppLovin, IronSource, and Bungle. That is both in terms of the vitality of those platforms and the results that we're seeing come out of it. And for a bit of context, we're seeing about 150 million a month flow through our platform. So we have a decent view into the ecosystem, and that's where these recommendations are coming from. A fairly significant change that we'll talk about over the course of the next couple of sessions here is persona-led creative with user motivations and how to do that, and how to think quantitatively about doing different styles of creative development, modifying your onboarding flow, and then really embracing the inevitable contextual advertising and moving away from the certainty of, say, AEO and VO bidding tied to lookalike audiences. So, those are the things to really focus on.
Thanks, Brian. This has been really helpful. I hope it's been great for our audience. Stay tuned for the next segment in this series with Brian. We'll dive into creative is king. There's a lot more that meets the eye than silly creative ads that we see for mobile games. Let's dive into how they're built. Thanks for joining.